Hi everyone, we're gathered together again today to study the books of Hosea, Micah, 2 Kings 14 to 20, and also some church history later on. Before I start today's lesson, I just wanted to mention that this broadcast is presented to the facilities of Golden Gems Radio. They can be found at www.goldengems.net, and they feature each week the life of the music of one of the greatest artists of the golden days of radio in the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s, when music was music. I'd like to invite you to listen to them. Today for our Old Testament class, we're going to study the books of Hosea, Micah, and 2 Kings 14 to 20, the kingdom of Israel and the lost 10 tribes. I need to say something before I start. These chapters are sad. The Old Testament is actually really a sad book, and so is the New Testament, because they talk about the demise of the people. In the Old Testament, the people almost become extinct. And in the New Testament, they do as well. The Book of Mormon is the same with the Lamanites and the Nephites. Now you'd ask yourself the question: why so much sadness? Why so much devastation? Why so much destruction? The purpose for the Lord to show this to us is so that we can avoid it. If we don't listen and obey the words of the Lord, we will be destined to have the same fate as they had. That's not something that we want to have experience. So it's my hope that through studying these books, we can learn from their bad mistakes, their bad examples, and put forth the good ones instead. It's hard to remember this on a day-to-day basis. This is why the prophets have asked us to read the scriptures day to day, every day, at least a few minutes a day, so you can remember what happens when people choose not to follow the Lord. During the time of Hosea, the Israelites were influenced heavily by the worship and ways of the Canaanites. The sophistication of the city-based Canaanite farmers who surrounded them, the fertility of their flocks and fields, which was apparently elicited from the gods and goddesses of fertility, attracted the Israelite farmers. The Israelite farmers wanted to have their farms succeed the same way that the Canaanite farmers succeeded. This is very, very dangerous because it led the Israelites into false worship. Similarly, in our day, we have people around us that are very successful financially. They are making tons of money. As I've watched the building of homes in my lifetime, they've doubled and tripled and quadrupled in size. Many by people who are not devout followers of our faith. And so the book of Hosea was meant, and Micah as well, was meant to teach the people they can have more success as they follow the Lord. But this success in following the Lord is not temporal success, it's spiritual success. And it lasts forever, not just for this lifetime. That sometimes is very hard to differentiate. The rites by which the people supplicated the gods of fertility were lewd, licentious, and immoral in every way. I could talk a lot about the gross trials and the gross worship of the kings, but I would not do it. Even though Israel had covenanted at Sinai to become a kingdom of priests and a holy nation to God, by the time of Hosea, God's people had become deeply involved in the practices of their neighbors, whose ways of life should have repelled them completely. Using the familiar imagery of marriage, the Lord through Hosea taught his people that though they had been unfaithful to him, yet he would still not divorce them, cast them off, if they would but turn back to him. I think the message of Hosea is that the Lord is very patient with us. He tries really hard to give us the benefit of the doubt. He tries really hard to coax us along and lead us along if we'll just follow him. Though Hosea speaks of a nation, the same principles hold true for individuals. Even those who have been grossly unfaithful to God can reestablish their relationship with him if they'll but turn back to the full purpose of the heart. Nephi said that to understand the writings of Isaiah, one has to understand the Jewish ways of prophesying. The same is true of Hosea, because he, like Isaiah, made extensive use of metaphors and symbolism. In fact, the book of Hosea cannot be understood unless you understand the symbolism that he's using. One metaphor that is central to Hosea's message is that of marriage. Marriage is something that used to be common in every culture. In our days, it's becoming less common, but it was common for many, many years. Throughout history, every culture has prescribed ways to celebrate the covenants of marriage. Because most people had personal knowledge of marriage, they were married. They understood the Lord better when the prophets used marriage terms to describe symbolically the covenants God made with them and they with him. When we marry in the temple, we make covenants with our spouse. Covenants to be faithful. Covenants to keep God's commandments. Covenants to stay true to the church and to the teachings of it. Thus, the covenant relationship between Jehovah and his people, Israel, was likened to the relationship between a man and his wife, or a wife and her husband. In the symbolic marriage covenant, God is the husband and Israel, the covenant people, is the bride. God wrote Israel in the covenant of Abraham. Come back in Genesis 17. The covenant was renewed with Moses' people at the foot of the Mount Sinai. Isaiah 54 verse 5 reads, "For thy maker is thine husband." And Jeremiah 3:14 reads, "For I am married unto you." The Lord wanted us to understand that he was the husband and we were the wife, symbolically, in this covenant relationship. Further references to God's role as husband in the covenant are found in Jeremiah 3:20, 31:32, and even in Revelation 19 verse 7. When Israel turned away from her husband to worship other gods, she broke those covenants. When we turn away from our God and worship other gods, or don't worship anyone at all, we also break the covenant. I look at my neighbors, just in the little ward that I live in. So many of my neighbors have left the church because of its stand on homosexuality, or its stand on gays, or they've just left because they're no longer interested. That, my friends, is breaking the covenant that we made with Jehovah. The covenant we made when we were, quote unquote, married to him through our temple covenants. I wish I had the words to describe how important these covenants are. I don't have the words to describe it, but they're that important. The scripture says in Hosea, quote, "She hath committed great whoredoms, departing from the Lord, and hath played the harlot." That's what the book of Hosea teaches, and that is the truth. Was Hosea actually commanded to marry a harlot? No. In the very first chapter, he shows himself marrying a harlot. He doesn't really marry one. That would be contrary to the character and nature of God. Of course he doesn't do that. Sperry said that Hosea never actually could contract such a marriage. He defended his viewpoint with an authoritative argument that seems authoritative to Latter-day Saints. He said, quote, "The Lord calls Hosea to take on a harlotess woman to wife and represents the prophet's call to the ministry, a ministry to an apostate and covenant-breaking people. So Hosea's marriage to the harlot is compared to our relationship to the prophet if we do not follow our covenants. The evil children of this apparent union represent the coming of the judgments of the Lord upon Israel, warning of which was to be carried out to the people by that prophet." In Hosea chapter 1 verses 1 to 4 we read, quote, in Hosea's narrative, Gomer bore the husband 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter. Now Gomer is a harlot. Hosea is not. In the story, he marries this harlot, and they have three supposed children, 2 sons and a daughter. The names of the children appear to symbolize the destruction that will come upon Israel because of her adulterous ways. That is, the children, the judgments, are the natural results of Israel's harlotry and unrighteousness. The name of the first child is Jezreel. It is the same as the valley of the former King Jehu's bloody purge, and foreshadows Israel's overthrow in that strategic valley. It is a valley overlooked by Megiddo, and famed for crucial battles past and in the future. The Battle of Armageddon will happen there. Jezreel means God shall sow, or scatter abroad. Sensationally, sowing was done by casting handfuls of seeds. It alludes to the overthrow and scattering of Israel. What a sad story, my friends. What a sad, sad story. But Israel was overthrown. In Hosea chapter 1, verses 6 to 10, we read, quote, the name Lo Maha in Hebrew means not having obtained mercy, and suggests that no amount of mercy from God would set aside divine justice and save northern Israel. The 10 tribes would be taken captive and led away, which they were. The name of the third child, Lo-Ami in Hebrew means not my people, is like a lament and shows that by their harlotry, Israel could not be thought of as God's people. Can you imagine not being counted as God's people because of your harlotry? Yet they were not counted as God's people because they broke the covenants they had made with Him. With the last two symbolic names, the Lord predicted the negative results of sin. But in the next verse, He held out a promise of hope. Let's look at Hosea chapter 1, verses 7 through 10. It's such a sad story, it's hard for me to even read it to you, but I have to because it's part of our curriculum. So sad. So sad. Hosea chapter 1. These books are small, so it's hard to find them. Here we go. Verses 7 through 10. But I will have mercy upon the house of Judah, and will save them by the Lord their God. I will not save them by how? By bow, nor by sword, nor by battle, by horses, or by horsemen. Yet the number of the children of Israel shall be the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured nor numbered. And it shall come to pass in the place where it was said unto them, Ye are not my people, there it shall be said unto them, Ye are the sons of the living God. So the Lord prophesies that in the future He will one day save Israel, and there is a great promise of hope there. Throughout the book, Hosea used the device of interweaving the promise of destruction, or a curse, with the promise of future restoration to favor, to give the children of Israel hope that if they would repent, they could be saved. It's sad to retell the destruction of Israel, but I'm going to do it just to keep the context of the story. In the United Kingdom of Israel, the glory days were during the days of David and Solomon, where all 12 tribes were united. After Rehoboam, the kingdom was divided because of his greed. The northern kingdom reversed idolatry under the reign of Jeroboam. Such a sad, sad, sad story. The demise of the kingdom of Israel. In 1 Kings chapter 10, verse 1 Kings chapter 12, we read, Rehoboam seeks to impose greater burdens upon the people. The 10 tribes revolted and turned to Jeroboam. Jeroboam turns to idolatry and worships false gods. So the children of Israel revolt against Rehoboam, and 10 tribes leave. But those 10 tribes become idolaters because their king turns them to idolatry. It's such a sad, sad story. It has a likening to our day. First, I read this, and I'll talk about our day. And Jeroboam said in his heart, Now the kingdom of David shall return to the house of David. If this people go up to do sacrifice in the house of the Lord at Jerusalem, then shall the heart of this people turn again unto their Lord, even unto Rehoboam, king of Judah, and they shall kill me, and go again to Rehoboam, king of Judah. So Jeroboam was afraid that their people are going to return to Rehoboam. Whereupon the king took counsel, and made 2 calves of gold, and said unto them, It is too much for you to go to Jerusalem at the temple. Behold thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt. And he set the one in Bethel, and the other one he put in Dan. And this thing became a sin, for the people went to worship before the one, even to Dan. And he made a house of high places, made priests of the lowest of the people, which was not the sons of Levi. And so Jeroboam goes against the priesthood. He goes against everything that's holy and sacred of Israel to keep the people away from Rehoboam. And he made a house of high places and made priests of the lowest people, who are not the sons of Levi. The priests aren't even from the Levites. Well, this of course leads to the demise of Israel. In 2 Kings 17 we read, now you might be wondering, what does this have to do with our day? A lot. Let me read this first, then we'll talk about what it has to do for our day. In the 9th year of Hosea, the king of Assyria, he took Samaria and carried Israel away into Assyria and placed him in Halah, in harbor by the river Gozan, in the city of the Medes. For so it was, the children of Israel had sinned against the Lord their God, which had brought them out of the land of Egypt, from under the hand of Pharaoh the king of Egypt, and had feared their gods, and walked in the statutes of the heathen, whom the Lord cast out from before the children of Israel, and of the kings of Israel, which they had made. And the children of Israel did secretly those things which were not right against the Lord their God, and they built them high places in all the cities, from the Lord of the watchman to the fenced city. They set them up images, and groves on the high hill, under every green tree. And then they burnt incense to all the high places, and did the heathen unto whom the Lord had carried away before them, and wrought wicked things to provoke the Lord their God to anger. For they served idols, wherein the Lord had said unto them, Ye shall not do this thing. And the Lord testified against Israel and against Judah by all the prophets and by all the seers, saying, Turn ye from your evil ways, and keep my commandments and statutes, according to the law which I commanded your fathers, which I sent to you by my servants the prophets. Notwithstanding they would not hear, but hardened their necks, like to the neck of their fathers. They did not believe the Lord their God. They rejected his statutes, and his covenants which he had made with their fathers, his testimonies which he testified against them. They followed vanity, they became vain, and went about after the heathen. They were round about them, concerning whom the Lord had charged them, they should not do like them. And they left all the commandments of the Lord their God, and made them molten images, even 2 calves, made a grove, worshipped all the hosts of heaven, and served Baal. And they caused their sons and their daughters to pass through the fire, and used divination and enchantments, and sold themselves to do evil in the sight of the Lord, to provoke him to anger. Therefore the Lord was very angry with Israel, and removed them out of his sight. There was none left but the tribe of Judah only. And also Judah kept not the commandments of the Lord their God, but walked in the statutes of Israel which they made. The Lord rejected all the seed of Israel, and afflicted them, and delivered them into the hand of the spoilers, until he had cast them out of his sight. For he ran Israel with the house of David, and they made Jeroboam the king of Nebat, and Jeroboam drove Israel from following the Lord, and made the sin a great sin. Such a terrible thing that they did. For the children of Israel walked in all the sins of Jeroboam, which he did. He departed not from them, until the Lord removed Israel out of his sight, as he had said to the servants of the prophets. So is Israel carried away out of their own land to Assyria to this day. So we see a great apostasy in Israel. First in the kingdom of Israel under Jeroboam, but later in the kingdom of Judah as well. And so the 10 tribes became lost, or they became taken captive by the Assyrians, and they went to Assyria. It says in the scriptures, even unto this day. Of course, once the Assyrians took the 10 tribes captive, they were scattered throughout the world, and their